You know what? Most people think that if you're starting a business or you're building a business, that there is a lot of action that goes on all the time. The sort of stories that are told in in business school are not necessarily the stories of real life. And I actually want to talk about that. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massock. I'm an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm building the whole reciprocity platform. It started out as this sort of sharing economy editing platform where you can get you can either help other people out on the platform by editing their work, or you can purchase credits. And what I've realized with a lot of it, and this is where people kind of get messed up, is that the stories that were told in terms of the startup world is that there's all sorts of action that's happening all the time, and that there's things that are going on. And in some industries that it's very true that there's all sorts of actions that are going on, right? Like if you're in retail, if you're in the right spot, or a restaurant industry, you need that action that's going on a fair bit. But in a lot of industries, you actually don't have a lot where you're building something. So with the reciprocity platform, there's this sort of long R&D period that we've been doing a lot of development for a long time. And it's so slowly, gradually building, but I started out on this journey, I think it was 2005 when it initially started, and we're still building it out. And initially I was trying to get people together, and nobody would get together. So I finally found a contract manufacturer and developed a little bit of it, and then it kind of paused because that contract developer went like AWOL basically. And then so I had to find another one, and then as I found another one, we started doing it, but then it's because it's my wife and I that are funding this thing. We had to scrape together funds, and now we're sort of incrementally growing this thing and making it better and improving it and slowly building it out. But there is a lot of downtime that happens. And for me to think about things to say and to talk about every day is relatively easy compared to the downtime that you experience. And even today, I thought, it's so actually, so I started doing, YouTube videos and stuff, and then I figured out that, man, you got to do this all the time. And so I have to sort of fill airspace and talk about things. Turns out you can fill a lot of airspace by talking about all sorts of stuff and your thoughts. And so that's how the podcast started, after getting into all sorts of things, different social media. And what you realize is that, building these kind of things, it might take, to go through a round or build on a, before we put something into production, because there's this cycle that you have to do, right? So the developer has to build things. You kind of have a conversation, the developer builds, and then you look at it and it's not perfect, or it's not what you're thinking. And then you revise it, and then once it gets kind of like good enough, you put it into production. But that cycle takes, it takes a while before that's actually something, right? And this is still doing it on the cheap, because we don't have designers and all this other kind of things which would be nice to have, but we can't afford it. I can't afford it. By the way, if you hear wind, I'm just going for a walk. And what you realize is that there is a lot of downtime that you do, and this, it's partly the benefit of it, you can get somebody else to sort of work on something, but also it sort of takes the romantic nature out of it, that there's all these deals flying and all that kind of stuff, but that's not what happens. It really isn't. There's a lot of slow, tedious work where you're sort of building and gathering things. And if you read a lot of these, I read a lot of papers, and I read a lot of sort of startup stories and things like that. They always skip through it and how long it actually takes. Like they quickly say, over a course of a few years. But if you think about that, a few years is a long time, and most people get very, that's in the nature of how long that actually takes. That's where people kind of quit or give up on what they're doing. And it is a very long time, right? Like even for me, you look back and, man, I started doing YouTube videos and things. I think it was probably 2016 or somewhere around there, 17. And it is a long time, right? It's a lot of dedication to something like that. And it is growing, it's sort of expanding, but it does take an awful lot of work that people sort of, they don't sort of realize that there is all of this that goes on. But my message that I wanted to say with this is, don't get sort of caught up in the fact that it's taking a lot longer than you think it's going to take, and that there is sort of a lot of downtime. That is actually the beauty of it, is that it is taking a long time. And that actually is the sort of entry barrier that people forget about. Is that the reason why nobody wants to do these kind of things is it's a long, slow grind where it takes forever to build it. It's not like you put up a couple of web pages and then all of a sudden everything sort of starts happening. But it's just this slow, tedious grind where you try something, you wait for 30 days or 90 days until you see what happens, and then you try it again. And you keep doing that day in and day out, over and over and over again. And lots of people will listen to this and they'll be like, well, that seems boring. But that's actually the truth of it, is that it's this sort of slow grind. And I think if you listen to this right now, you listen to this one podcast, and you kind of have startup fever at this moment, listen to it as it is a slow, boring, tedious grind. And if you can still think about hey, you know what, I'm going to do this, even though I know it's going to be this slow, tedious grind, and I'm going to think you on the audience on the other side, you're probably thinking, listening to this, and you're thinking, well, that's not going to be me, everything's going to happen. Of course, everybody thinks like that, right? But when you do it, you're going to realize that, and it does happen to you. At least you kind of know, this crazy professor talked about this. It's going to be this slow, boring grind. And then you won't think that you're crazy or anything like that. Just know that you're absolutely normal with it. So that's all I wanted to say, is if you listen to this, this is what you'd expect. It's going to be a long, slow, boring grind where you're going to have a lot of downtime. It's going to feel like there's not much going on, but that's exactly where you need to be. That's perfect, and that's where it is, and you have to be okay with that. So with that, give me a thumbs up if you like this. Take care and have a wonderful day.